It's us again. We're back. Josh and Austin figure it out. I'm Josh.
I'm Austin.
Wow. What a whirlwind. We just released our first episode, and I can't tell you how many people have listened to it because I don't know yet.
The crowds were, banging down our doors to get episode 2 out. So here we are doing episode 2.
Yeah.
What, Josh, do you know that stat about like the average longevity of a podcast? Isn't there like a magic number that you have to hit to like it's like a signifier if you're going to make it long term? I don't think
I
it's
haven't.
2, but have you heard of that?
Oh, no, I haven't, but I wonder what it is. It's got to be more than two, right?
I
Do
think
you
it's
need a
like I
full.
think it's like 7 or it's pretty low. Like 11. Like most podcasts don't make it past episode 7. I don't know. But we'll throw a
Well,
party
we
if we
should.
make it there.
We should. On episode 8, we'll have a little celebration. Who knows what the
Yep.
world will be like then? Maybe it'll be 2028. We'll have long, long beards and be in a retirement home. But
Yep. We'll do it.
so, yeah, I am. Hope you're doing well. It's been a couple weeks since we actually spoke with our last episode, but this past weekend we did potty training for our youngest, our 2-year-old, in our house, and that was boy, it was a ride. We did 5 days straight because the boys were home from school because the school was closed, which is a convenient time to do like an intense potty training session. And by the end of the weekend, he was finally going number 1 and number 2.
That's big.
Had done his first number 2, which was lovely.
So I have a number of questions already.
Yes.
So you're talking about potty training your 2-year-old. That's what you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have multiple children. The
Yes.
2-year-old is who we're talking about now. That seems kind of young to start potty training. Is that right?
It is
It
kind
strikes
of.
me as young.
Yeah. We potty trained our oldest when he was at least 2.5, and so he was older. He was much more like communicative and definitely ready, probably well past ready. And so you'll read different things from quote unquote experts about the best time to do it. And some of them will say that if they're like they're keeping their diaper dry, or if they're telling you when they went, or even if they're sitting on the potty and going, that's great. But yeah, Joel, our youngest, was doing all that, and it was awesome. So it's we weren't sure if he would be quite ready to do all the moves, but I think he's going to get there. It's just going to take a little time, but it can be so frustrating trying to do it because you're in the middle of it, the thick of it, and you're like, oh, this is never going to work. What are we doing? This is so because you're kind of in lockdown. Do you have a
Yeah.
plan for when you want to try it?
So I really had no idea that you could even start that soon. Yeah, for context, Josh and I are both dads. If you didn't pick that up already,
We are. Yeah. We're not talking about other people's children.
I just have one child right now. I have a daughter, and she's just over a year old. So I thought I had more time before I had to start thinking about this, but apparently not. If I want to keep Daisy in lockstep with the developments of your children, which I want to. So tell me about an intense potty training boot camp. What does a potty training boot camp look like? Like, how you said it was intense, and I can imagine a few ways that it was intense, but what did you mean by that exactly?
We follow this book, and I don't remember the name of it, but I can share the link in the podcast notes. But this book is great. It's a pretty short book, and it tells you like the best sort of a really good method for going at potty training. And it's like an intense 3-day thing where you literally, you kind of keep their pants off so they're in underwear, and you are constantly asking them, hey, tell me when you need to use the potty. And it is very specific. It's tell me when you need to use the potty, not tell me if you want to go potty, or tell me when you want to go potty, because that's very like that could be
Yeah.
interpreted like, oh, I don't want to go on potty at all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you're just, it seems like you're a broken record. You'll have to like stock up on a bunch of like fun drinks so that the kid is hydrated and that they need to go. You have to keep it like constant eye on them. So just be aware like when they might go normally and like try to intercept and like redirect them to the toilet, and then avoid things that might like suck their attention, like TV, where they would just like, get so pulled into the TV and not think about needing to go to the bathroom. Like,
yeah, who hasn't been there?
Yeah. Yep. And then you just kind of go every 20 or 30 minutes too, and just have them sit on the potty. But that worked really well for our first, and it worked pretty well for our second. So I would recommend that. I'll tell you when I know the name of that.
That's good to know, Josh. It's good to know that there are other people that have been through the trenches and have figured out the tricks before I have to. So thanks for sharing that with me. When the time comes, I'll let you know how it goes. I imagine I will also be coming back and describing it as an intense experience and somewhat of a boot camp. But I'm glad to know that I have some people in my corner when it's time to figure this out.
It takes a village. We're all part of that village. Everyone who's listening right now too. Keep Austin in your thoughts. Did you by chance go to the state fair? Because the Iowa State Fair just wrapped up. Nice.
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about this as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those that aren't in the Midwest, the Iowa State Fair is a very large event. I believe this year is actually the attendance record. It was over a million, 1.1 million, something like that. Attendance over a 10-day period. And the fair is basically you go and you eat all manner of deep fried foods and foods on a stick that aren't normally on a stick, and you look at large animals and large produce, and there are concerts and magicians and square dancing, and I don't even know what else, but it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal here in Iowa. I am not an avid fair goer. I'm a fair food enjoyer, so we typically go just one evening. We go just like around dinner. We get our few items that we enjoy. This year it was the barbecue sushi roll.
Nice.
Which was rice and jalapeno corn rolled in a pork tenderloin and sliced to appear like sushi. It was quite good. I highly recommend that. The other thing we always get are mini cinnamon sugar donuts and foot-long corn dogs. And we get in, we do our business with the food, and we get out of there. We don't linger.
You don't linger. You're there for a purpose. Like find the food. Yeah. Yep. That's terrific. I saw that sushi roll in a newspaper article, but I didn't see it in person. And did it taste? Was it the texture and experience of eating sushi, or was it like, no, I'm eating straight up just barbecue?
I would not describe it as the experience of eating sushi, but it did kind of look like it. Yeah, they did a good job on the presentation, and it tasted quite excellent. So I gather you went to the fair as well, Josh. Tell me about your experience.
I did last week when the boys were home. I took them. I went just with the two boys, and so it was a little bit a little nervous I'd lose one of them. So I put an air tag on my oldest on his shoe. Smart. By the way, nice little life hack. What I did differently this year as compared to previous years is I made a list ahead of time of the fun foods that I wanted to see, because when you're there you have angry, hungry 3 or 4 year old, and it's 11 and the lines are starting to get long. You don't have time to go find the neat food. And so I made a list ahead of time of where the things were, and I kind of mapped it out. So that I had that on my side. That said, I only got maybe 1 or 2 of the things that I was searching for. One of them was sold out. The others were just too far off the route. So the thing that I got on the list was apple crisp taco, and it was great. It was like the taco shell was made of, I don't know what it is. It was some sort
kind of
like pastry thing, yeah. And then it's just apple crisp inside with some ice cream, and it was terrific. But we had the standard, we had standard corn dog and various other snacks for the boys, and it was good. And we did some. They have like a kids zone where it's like helping out on the farm. So you go through this little course and you gather your whatever seeds and stuff, and then you get go to the farmer's market at the end and get a little fake dollar. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Overall, really fun. A good experience. So another successful year.
Was this pre or post potty training boot camp?
Mid potty training boot camp, which makes it even more audacious, right? Because he had done, this would have been Friday.
Bold.
He had started on Wednesday and he was doing great. And we're like, ooh, what do we do? Do we stick a diaper on him? Do we risk it? Like, so what we did was put a pull-up on him, and he kept a dry pull-up the entire day.
Wow.
Which is just incredible.
That's huge.
It is. We used the potty, the public restrooms, which is not a super pleasant experience with a 4 and 2 year old, but he did great. Yep.
Talking about a potty camp, potty training boot camp, the introduction of the public restroom, that is intense. I am, the more you talk, the more I'm like, yeah, intense. Potty training boot camp is the right way to describe that. You went to level 10 just right away. The public restroom at the Iowa State Fair. That's hardcore.
Yep. That's where maybe we should just start there, It's like, hey, you're going to learn to start potty training. It's going to be 100% public restroom. That would be kind of brutal, but
it's like the swim training for babies, where you just throw them in the deep end. It's the same. It's analogous to that. You're just throwing them right in the worst possible environment and just sink or swim.
Yeah, and throwing a porta potty every now and then just to keep them on their toes. Yeah. oh boy. Well, I'm glad you and I both made it to the fair. That's great. Yeah. It was perfect weather for it this year, and that's probably why they had such good attendance. So.
Yes.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, it's a good time.
Yeah. Turning to our topic of the day, which is full stack JavaScript. Josh and Austin would like to figure out full stack JavaScript, or at least talk about it. It's been kind of the rage. It was like a hot topic back in May. It's now August, so we're a little bit behind. But we didn't have a podcast back then.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just gonna slowly catch up on the trends from Twitter. Just a few months behind. No one's gonna care anymore, but we're gonna hash it out. And if we can figure out full stack JavaScript in the next 30 minutes, we're gonna be very wealthy individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big discussion stemmed from like comparing two things specifically. One of them is Laravel, which is a PHP framework. And another is just, I think, React in general, or it may have been Next, or it may have been something. But people on the internet were kind of arguing, why don't people using JavaScript have the same experience of a single framework that does all this stuff for me like Laravel does, or like Rails does for Ruby? And everyone had opinions.
So now it's time to share ours.
Now it's time to share ours. Austin, do you have any opinions? Like, what's your thought on full stack JavaScript? And I don't know, do we need to break it down a little bit further as far as what that means?
Yeah, we should probably do some definitions. I think that's the definition question is maybe a source of a lot of contention as well, because people mean different things when they say full stack JavaScript. So if you're deep in the JS ecosystem, and a framework says it's full stack, that usually means that you have the ability to write front-end JavaScript as well as a spot to shove your back-end JavaScript, your stuff that's going to run on a server. So like with the Next.js, you have your get server-side props pattern where you can run your server code, and then you have just your regular React pages that are going to run on the front end. And with Remix, you have loaders and actions that's going to run on the back end, where your React stuff's going to run on the front end. So that's one definition of full stack JS. Some people, I should say, from the PHP and Ruby ecosystem say that's too narrow of a definition. The full stack of an application should include sending emails and running cron jobs and pushing stuff onto queues and notifications and basically every concern that has to do with building a modern web application. And they kind of throw all that under the umbrella of full stack JavaScript. And I think that's kind of the discussion we're having, right? Is something like that, why hasn't that taken over in the JavaScript ecosystem like Laravel and Ruby on Rails and Phoenix has, and those other ecosystems? Because there's nothing like that in the JavaScript ecosystem that's gotten a really big mind share. And I do think it's an interesting discussion. And I think, Josh, you have a unique perspective as well as someone that has written a lot of Laravel and PHP, but is also knee deep in the JavaScript ecosystem, having written your own JavaScript frameworks as well. So I'm curious to get your take. Like, is there anything in kind of that definitional piece that you wanted to touch on, or what direction do you want to go with it from here?
I think there's so many angles you can approach this with. One is you see the like network chasm discussed. Mm-hmm. You see the network chasm discussed quite a bit in a couple cases. One is this video by Aaron Francis. He talks about the back end, the network, then front end, sort of the hop you have to make. Another is Ryan Florence's talk that he gave at a recent conference about React Server Components, in fact, which is kind of that network chasm. And so you could approach it from that way. It's like, Laravel lives on the back end and all the React stuff lives on the front end, but that's not true either, because you have Laravel templating stuff, which you might consider a front end thing, and then you have layer and JavaScript there to help with Laravel stuff, and then you have React stuff that runs on the server as well, especially now with React Server Components. And so it's hard. I think another direction you could attack it is productivity, like developer productivity. Are you productive with the bare bones thing that you get from X framework enough to build out your SaaS or build the feature that you need to build and focus on your business logic without wiring a bunch of other things? And I say in that case, I think that's where Laravel, my experience with Laravel shines in that direction. It's just amazing when you sit down with a Laravel application and you want to do something. You mentioned queues or cron jobs or notifications. Like that stuff is, it's almost baked in. There's some, no, it is baked in. So there's a mail abstraction and mailers that you can hook up to third-party services that send the mail, but by default, like the mailers are built into Laravel, and then notifications are kind of wrapped around that and provide just a really nice interface to communicate with your users. And then queues and cron scheduled jobs are all built in. And so all you got to do is just like pop into the Laravel website and read up on their documentation, and suddenly like your stuff is working. And gosh, I think that's if you're looking to debate or like try to figure out, okay, is there a JavaScript equivalent? That might be a good place to start.
Yeah, I think for me, like the way I've kind of been using terms lately is kind of full stack versus batteries included, which I think is kind of a concept that Taylor Otwell has mentioned as well, the creator of Laravel. Whereas I think that helps make the distinction a little bit more clear. And I have kind of a theory like that I've been thinking about lately with the JavaScript side of, like a modern fully JavaScript application today, if they wanted to have all the functionality that one of the batteries included frameworks includes out of the box. So, sending emails is a classic example. Like if you have an application that's going to do something useful, you're going to have to send an email at some point. And, Next, Remix, Redwood, name your JavaScript framework, SvelteKit, Nux, like those you're not going to find, email sender API on their docs anywhere. So it leads to a lot of patching either third-party packages or paid services on your JavaScript framework. And my theory kind of regarding this is, I think there's an interesting parallel between like the maturation of server-side JavaScript kind of alongside the serverless compute paradigm. And kind of those two things growing up together and getting really tied together especially when you look at a Next.js with Vercel. Vercel server-side code that runs in an AWS Lambda that's short-lived. It's not you can't be writing files in there. You can't be running separate processes in there that are long-lived. And I think a lot of the JavaScript community that's entered into the ecosystem more recently, especially, that's kind of all they've known, right? Is writing a function and exporting it from a file, and having someone put that on AWS for you. And in that kind of paradigm, it would be really hard to integrate all of these different pieces of functionality in a really cohesive way if you can't rely on a server or a long-lived process or the ability to write files or all these different things. Whereas I feel like this is just my feeling. I wasn't in the PHP ecosystem at the time, but it seems like PHP developers are a lot more accustomed to be like, yeah, I'm gonna spin up a DigitalOcean or Laravel Forge or something like that, where I have a server that's running all the time and I can do all these things, and it's no problem to have another process to send mail or another process to handle my queues or jobs or whatever. So it would just make sense for my PHP framework to do that for me, because you kind of make that assumption that you're going to have that long-lived server. And so that's kind of a theory I've been thinking about lately, because I think it is a piece of this puzzle that's applicable in some instances, which I know you can deploy Laravel on AWS. They have, Laravel Vapor or whatever, it's called, where you can do these things. But I think there's something to that. Do you have a response to that, Josh?
I agree with you. I think you're onto something. The fact that we've seen so many of these JavaScript frameworks pop up and mature during the time of serverless and AWS Lambdas and everything, and Cloudflare workers and stuff that's really taken the world by storm, that has to have a non-zero effect on the way frameworks are built and composed. And so I think that does make a big difference, which is so funny, because you can, just like you can deploy DigitalOcean droplet with a PHP application, you can deploy one with a Node.js application too. And people have for a long time, and they ran their own queues using a different process, not unlike how you would run a queue worker in PHP. And it's just funny that it's not the way to do it like it is in PHP, that we've ended up in a serverless oriented world for JavaScript functions, but we haven't in PHP. Do you think it's related to the fact that that JavaScript is able to run in the browser too? Like there's some isomorphic aspect to it, where the code that you've written for your browser client-side component also runs on the server, and maybe because of that there's a much more crossover between the isolated functionality of JavaScript. So it's not, like you said, writing files, because you can't do that in the browser without access to more recent file APIs, but you could with PHP. We don't have PHP running in the browser, asterisk. We do with Wasm, but it's not commonplace. Maybe that's the case.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think kind of along those lines, the ecosystems and the cultures that programming languages have around them are obviously going to shape the water, the atmosphere that frameworks get created in. So I think there might be something to that. And I heard Ryan Florence make a point similar on a podcast, talking about there really is, there's no such thing as the JavaScript ecosystem, quote unquote. Since JavaScript is the only language that runs in the browser, asterisk, WASM, whatever. That every programmer from every language ecosystem that wanted to do stuff on the web was going to have to write JavaScript at one point. So there was no cohesive JavaScript ecosystem of people that just loved to write JavaScript, and that surrounded around one or two charismatic leaders, because everyone was forced into the JavaScript ecosystem, whether they liked it or not, to do stuff on the web. So I think there's something interesting there as well. The the JavaScript ecosystem is huge and sprawling and lacks cohesiveness, if you want to look at it in the negative light, because the people that write it and their backgrounds and their cultures that's also a huge and sprawling. So I think there is something inherent to the nature of JavaScript that has kind of led us down this path. But yeah, I don't know.
Do you think speaking of people, gosh, T3.gg has this video about like why won't we have a Laravel for JavaScript, and his TLDR is it's the community in the way that JavaScript is composable, plug and play, write your own utility for doing everything. And that's the reason that there won't be a one-size-fits-all framework like a Laravel or Rails for JavaScript. I don't know if I buy that as like the answer. And I know that that's kind of like Kent C. Dodds's takeaway too. It's just not in the nature of our community to want to do that. It's just not, people just want to grab bag of things. So I don't know if I'm looking at it from a positive or like optimistic lens. I almost wonder if it has to be built around the hosting platform. So it needs to be opinionated for something that's going to work on a DigitalOcean droplet, or in the case of like Superflare, which is a project I built like Cloudflare. So built all around their offerings and primitives to do all the things that you need to do in JavaScript in a way that you're pretty much used to writing it. But you don't have to go and connect a billion different services and plug and play a bunch of different things yourself. You can just get back to writing your business logic.
Yeah. I wanted to go there as well. Like the idea of framework tied to infrastructure opinions, I think there's definitely a path forward there. I wanted to say, like, in general, I think I agree that I don't think there will ever be something like Rails or Laravel in the JavaScript ecosystem as far as the mind share, as far as like, just because the JavaScript ecosystem is just huge. It's extremely varied in use case and very large. I don't think we're ever going to see a single dominant framework that's used as widely as something like a Laravel or Rails. But to your point, I do think there's space. I think there's room for a framework biased towards productivity in the same way that like a Laravel is, if it's married to an infrastructure, either an infrastructure provider or just an infrastructure style in general. Like if you say that you can use this framework, but you have to do it on serverless, or you have to do it on AWS, or even have to do it on a Cloudflare specifically, like your choice with Superflare. I think there's a real unlock there. Because if you can make those assumptions and you have those constraints in place, that's where you can get the deep integration and the cohesion of a batteries included framework. If you're like, I can provide queues because I know I have Cloudflare queues, or I have Amazon SQS or whatever. You don't have to say, well, we'd like to add queues, but a lot of our users are on Vercel, and Vercel doesn't provide that yet, so we have to wait. You don't have to make those kinds of trade-offs if you can operate within a certain set of constraints. So I'd like to hear more about like what were some of your main driving like motivations for starting Superflare? Because I think it came out. It was like you obviously were working on it, and it came out long before all of this drama on Twitter. So like what kinds of things were you thinking about when you made Superflare, and what kind of constraints did you put in along these lines?
Part of the stuff that drives me to build it is a cheap motivation of myself, that I don't want to pay for a server that's running all day to host an app that is going to get no traffic. And so that's where serverless stuff comes in, right? And that I get the appeal of that, and the widespread success of serverless in our culture. So what I was chasing was the developer friendliness and productivity of Laravel, but in JavaScript, where I was spending a lot of my time writing code or was seeing a lot of cool stuff coming out. One of those cool things coming out was D1. And so Cloudflare D1 is their database, relational database offering. It's kind of like a SQLite variation under the hood. And it's again similar to their other offerings where you don't have to do anything. Like, it's just a database, you run a command and it's there. You don't have to worry about a process running or a database running out of memory, or choosing the right box size or paying for it when nobody's querying it. It's pretty terrific. And so that with the introduction of D1, that's when I was like, okay, I can kind of maybe make this happen with full stack JavaScript, opinionated for Cloudflare. You've got a relational database to drive like a sort of active record ORM model system in JavaScript. You've got R2, which is their blob storage for file uploads and other basic blob storage needs. You've got KV for things. I'm not exactly sure what you use KV for. I'm sure lots of stuff. But then all the other fun stuff that's sprinkled in. Queues they introduced recently as well. And so you can hook in queues and write jobs described as JavaScript classes and dispatch those from your main worker code and Superflare and queues them in a Cloudflare queue, and then also sets up a listener to handle the queue in production and execute the job, and loads up all the associated database models automatically for you. And so it's really like it chases that feeling that you get in a Laravel or a Rails. But it's it was a fun thing. It's not fully there yet, and like it's not dead either. There's a couple open source people who are actually actively contributing to get it like updated to the latest Cloudflare and latest kind of remix template, which is so impressive, incredible that they're putting in this much effort to do that. And I haven't had time personally to do it, but I would love to keep pushing on it. My optimistic take is that, like, yes, the full stack JavaScript thing has been attempted before in the form of Adonis and Blitz and other prior art, but just because those didn't take off does not mean that a really well-designed framework can't really capture the market and become like a tastemaker in that space. I don't know if it will be my thing or someone else's thing, but regardless, it's fun to try and build it.
Yeah, 100%. I think Superflare is a really impressive project already, just even in the unfinished state, in your words, that is in today. I think it's a really cool kind of exploration of these ideas. I wanted to touch on, like, with your experience of building Superflare and just as a user of Laravel as well, like, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on, like, why would we want this in JavaScript? Like, what's the appeal of having a batteries included framework, which I think we've alluded to already, of just the sheer productivity gains, but like in like a very real and like concrete sense, like thinking back to Theo's video that you mentioned earlier, where it's like he called it it's a strength of JavaScript, that we have all these separate modules, which means we can swap them in and out, swap in the best versions of each piece whenever we want. We're not relying on one giant framework or one small team that maintains it to keep up with the state of the art in each of the realms of authentication and emails and crons, whatever. Which I think there is some truth to that, but I think there's a broader point of the benefits of a batteries included framework aren't just limited to someone made technology decisions for each of these components. It's not just that you get those things out of the box, it's that they're all built together with a cohesive idea where, your authentication knows about your queues and your queues know about your email service and your and your emails know about your testing set, like that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So as someone that's been in that world, like, tell me more about like the benefits you get from the cohesion perspective.
That's such a good point, is the things know about each other. And if there's not a really better way to say that other than like synergy or whatever, but there's something about having all the batteries in the same box that are aware of each other and can make assumptions about a given authentication system, for example, that make it so lovely to build. Everything is following kind of a similar pattern. The APIs are similar. The conventions are set in place by the framework pretty strongly. And so you'll know pretty quickly in a Laravel or a Rails application, this is how controllers work, and this is how they're structured. This is where views are. This is how you pass data through everything from the request lifecycle. Here's how you would inject something into like a global helper or like a service container or something in Laravel. And so because those patterns exist in a given thing, it makes writing the code more enjoyable, first of all. Also quicker. You're able to more quickly pick up on patterns and know how to do something. You're not faced with dozens of decisions leading to decision paralysis as you're trying to build out what should be a simple thing, but now you have to in a JavaScript, empty JavaScript application, now you have to wonder, all right, what do I call this export? Where do I export it from? Do I group these files together in a different export module? Like what API did I use did I accept an object here or a string for this other tool, which is slightly unrelated, but also I'd want to make it consistent, and you end up with unfortunately, all these decisions you have to make. And so I think that's just it's hard to put a finger on what exactly that is, other than like really great developer experience when you're using something like Laravel, at least in my experience.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think like a key insight in my mind to this conversation is not like, I think it's fine, like as someone deep in the JavaScript ecosystem like I am, to look at what PHP and Ruby have and say, yeah, I actually think they did get these things right. JavaScript did them wrong. Like, I think it's easy to be tempted and just like, oh, well, different strokes for different folks. They like it this way, we like it this way. But there are certain aspects of an application, like you said, where it's like just doing something the same way every time is actually maybe really valuable, and it's kind of a waste of time to redo authentication every single time you have to set up a new JavaScript app. Like, I think there are these concepts in the more batteries included world where it's like you should be able to go into any Laravel app and immediately understand what's going on, because you have conventions, you have limited ways of doing things, and I think there's actually a lot of freedom in that, whereas any given Next.js application is a special snowflake that has their own thing going on. But the vast majority of our apps don't need to be special snowflakes, right? Like we all need to have users, so we should just be able to have users without installing a bunch of libraries and writing a bunch of boilerplate code that does really nothing, for our product at the end of the day. And same with sending emails and queuing jobs. Like, these are just things that need to be done, and the amount of wasted developer hours resetting up the same logic over and over and over again in JavaScript projects is it keeps me up at night, Josh. These are the things I think about in the middle of the night. Why did we do this?
It's one of the many curses of being a web developer in the year 2024.
Yep.
You can't sleep. Well, this was a lovely discussion of framework and JavaScript lore, front end, back end, full stack. We didn't really probably didn't even touch the surface on a lot of stuff, but I thought it was a really enjoyable.
Yeah, I had fun. I don't know if we actually solved it, but I had a good time.
Did we figure it out? No, we didn't figure it out. Someday we will.
Yeah. I think that might be the end of a lot of these episodes.
Yep. Well, that's it.
Well, maybe one day.
Do you have a neat thing that you want to share this week?
I actually didn't until you just mentioned it, but something came to my mind that I'm going to share anyways. So you might be familiar with Radix in the JavaScript ecosystem. They do like headless or unstyled React components that it's similar to like a React Aria components or a headless UI, that kind of thing. Where they give you these components like a modal or a drop down, whatever, that has all the behavior and the accessibility built in, but without any of the styling. You bring your own styling and layout. And I think like some of these libraries are some of the biggest value gains of using the React ecosystem, in my opinion. Like we can save our React opinions for a later episode. We don't have time to get into all that right now, but I think like the ecosystem is one of the number one value adds for React. But anyways, Radix is really cool. It has these unstyled, really powerful primitives, but it also has something called Radix themes, which is like it's an interesting compromise between like, all right, here's an unstyled component and here's a bootstrap button, right? Like I think there's a middle ground in there that's they've threaded pretty nicely, where you use their built-in components like your modal or your drop-down, whatever. And if you want to write all the styles yourself, you can. But if you don't want to do that, you can use the Radix themes, which just gives you this really consistent, clean, accessible, just good-looking design across all of their unstyled primitives. But it allows for, I think, the right amount of customization where you're not going to have a bunch, 100 sites that all look exactly like Bootstrap. You can pick your a handful of colors and typography options, and shadows and radii.
I don't know.
I've never said that out loud. Multiple radius options, but you get to pick a handful of options, and then it makes all your components look really good and consistent within those constraints. So I think it's really interesting. It's a really interesting middle ground between just being given a button that's a white background and black text and have fun, versus your really rigid, hard to customize Bootstrap button or Material UI button, where you can get a little bit of that customization to make your app look unique, but you get the consistency and the ease of use of some of those other more fully styled options. So I think it's a really good option for your quick side project, or your maybe smaller site or app design that doesn't need to be anything crazy or super unique, but you can get a little bit of customization and the consistency across. So I think it's cool, and you should check it out if you're using React and Radix.
Cool. I'll check that out. I've been impressed by the recent headless component libraries and stuff like I don't know, Shad CN or however it's pronounced. It's not headless per se, but just really impressive. So I haven't used Radix before personally, and I'd like to check that out.
Super cool.
Yeah. My thing this week would be Cursor. So Cursor is it's kind of like it's just VS Code, but it's got like a different application that you run on your computer, and it's got all the AI stuff built in. And it's different than Copilot, so it's not the same as Copilot, but it's similar. And here's where my knowledge really breaks down, because I don't know what they're doing differently, like how they're modifying whatever prompts, because I think it still talks to GPT-4 or something at some point. You can also hook it up to different models like Anthropic, Claude, or whatever. But gosh, it's really cool because it has the concept of multi-file context, and so you can attach any number of files from your code base, and it's already kind of indexed your code base, but you can be like, I want to add this new feature to my Laravel application, and you pop in like the controller or the livewire component or the blade view or the JavaScript file, and just say go, and it will like propose changes to all those files, and they kind of all have a relationship with each other, but it knows that relationship. And so you can just continue to write as if you're like a product manager. Here's what I want my users to be able to do, make it happen. And so I've seen a lot of cool videos of that happening. One of the most cool ones that popped up yesterday on Twitter was a 8-year-old girl building a Harry Potter AI chat interface in a web browser. Is using like Cloudflare and their AI bindings, but she's literally just typing in like, I want this hello world, instead of it say hello world, I want it to say Harry Potter. And then she just blindly accepts everything. But I still think that's so cool that she builds this like fully functional thing using Cursor. And so I'll link to that as well. But man, it's really cool. And I feel like it's, in my experience, it's just a little bit less polished, or maybe just I'm not used to it, but less polished than VS Code Copilot, but I also think VS Code will catch up eventually with like the multi-file editing world and stuff. But regardless, it's just incredible what we have access to that we did not have or could not have dreamed of 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I haven't used Cursor myself, but I've seen a lot of the same demos online. It looks really, really impressive. I think the multi-file context thing is really, really key. I find like if you're just opening, ChatGPT on your browser or whatever, it's like I'm not going to paste in my 20 files that I need
Right.
you to know about. But I think that could be really powerful. We don't want to turn this into an AI show today, and I'm probably in general more of an AI pessimist. I don't know. I'm not
canceled now.
I'm not like crazy. I'm not like a using AI all the time kind of guy, but I do. I've been trying to incorporate it more. I think that this is interesting, like having it right in your IDE. I think is obviously huge, like with the idea of co-pilots and having the help right there. I'm curious, can you when you're asking it to do stuff, is it like making files for you and like doing everything, or is it just giving you like, here's what I would do like in a text box, or is it actually editing your files on disk?
The flow is it will give it's a chat, so you're still chatting, which kind of feels like, you're chatting with somebody, but they are providing inline code snippets, and so same thing you'd see in a blog post, but what they have is it's like a diff, and so then you have options like reject this, or you can apply it, and then Cursor at least will apply that to the correct file. At which point in like the standard VS Code, it'll be like a modified file but not saved. So you still have yet another chance to like modify it and then hit save before you commit to that change. So there are a few like checks in place. It doesn't just start blindly like editing your whole code base, which could be kind of terrifying, honestly.
Yeah.
I was like, no, you're deleting all my stuff. This is terrible code.
Yeah.
Delete this. Delete.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's cool. I'll definitely check it out. Like I said, I've been dipping my toe a little bit more and using like Claude and stuff for day-to-day stuff. And I do think it's like the current state of the art can actually do a lot more probably than the average developer thinks.
Yep.
It's especially good with limited context, but I'm curious to see as context expands, like what kind of new capabilities it's going to afford us. Cool.
It's definitely a tool, and it's like all tools, they require training and learning and everything for people to use effectively. So
yeah, but not like all tools, it might kill us all.
Yeah, right. You
just have to keep that in mind.
Just the back of your mind, like this may end humanity, but it'll be cool.
But it made my drop down for me, so I'm good. It's a trade-off I'm willing to make. Like, we're good.
All right. Well, on that note, I guess we should wrap things up. We figured it out. Until next time, peace.
Yep. See ya.